SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Attention Vikings fans, let's put the cards on the table because the Vikings have 4 major decisions staring them directly in the face, and none comes with an easy escape route. Is Minnesota heading into the season with one running back too few? How much longer can this defense remain parked at the station waiting for Harrison Smith? If J.J. McCarthy falls short in the quarterback battle, could that somehow lead him out of Minnesota altogether? And did the Vikings allow Jalen Nailor to walk away just as he was approaching the biggest opportunity of his career? There is also a possible trade target who could reinforce one of the weakest areas on this roster. All offseason, Minnesota talked about breathing new life into the rushing attack. But listen, you can repaint the kitchen and still be missing the stove. No coaching adjustment can completely cover up the possibility that this backfield remains one established player short. The Vikings averaged 4.5 yards per carry last season, their most efficient rushing figure since Kevin O'Connell took over. Yet Minnesota finished only 27th in the NFL with 410 rushing attempts. A portion of that workload appeared after the offense was simplified to support J.J. McCarthy during the final 5 games. So when the temperature rises and the Vikings need tough yards, does O'Connell honestly believe in this running game? Offensive line coach Keith Carter and assistant head coach Frank Smith were brought in to help answer that question. Smith previously worked as Mike McDaniel's offensive coordinator in Miami, so he knows how to construct a rushing system that can produce. Still, a clever blueprint cannot carry the football. The personnel has to make the design work. Jordan Mason is back after totaling 758 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns on 159 carries. His 56% success rate offered real encouragement, but he contributed very little as a receiver, catching only 14 passes for 51 yards without a touchdown. That weakness may help explain his changing role. Mason played 63.5% of Minnesota's offensive snaps through the first 7 weeks, but that figure dropped all the way to 29.4% from weeks 8 through 16. Aaron Jones gained from Mason's reduced usage, though Jones brings another stack of concerns. He is entering his age 32 season after playing only 12 games in 2025 because of hamstring, shoulder, ankle, and hip injuries. The Vikings also have 6th-round selection Demon Claiborne, whose acceleration prompted Jones to compare him with Detroit Lions star Jahmyr Gibbs. That comparison poured gasoline on the excitement, but Claiborne is far from a finished product. He earned a 29.9 pass-blocking grade and put the ball on the ground 5 times across 179 attempts. Ty Chandler already discovered the hard way that raw speed is not a golden ticket in O'Connell's offense. If a running back cannot keep the quarterback clean or maintain possession, that player will struggle to earn snaps. Xavier Scott offers dependable depth, but his presence does not solve the central issue. Minnesota reportedly pursued Travis Etienne and looked into the markets for Kenneth Walker III and Kenneth Gainwell before those players landed elsewhere. That detail is important because it indicates the Vikings recognized the empty chair in the room but never filled it. Maybe Mason duplicates last season's output. Maybe Jones avoids another collection of injuries. Maybe Claiborne immediately brings the explosive dimension Minnesota has been searching for. The problem is that the Vikings need all 3 bets to pay out at the same time. If the redesigned rushing attack looks impressive on the chalkboard, but still stalls whenever Minnesota needs 1 or 2 yards, the front office could discover that the right moment to add another proven runner has already passed. Across the hallway, the defense is dealing with its own unresolved equation because Harrison Smith is the only person holding the answer key. Minnesota may already have waited too long to deepen the backfield, and now the team must remain patient while its veteran safety decides whether he wants another season. Smith has not said if he will return, and Alec Lewis of The Athletic emphasized that nothing has been settled. Lewis explained that there is no established timetable for the decision. Everything rests on where Smith stands physically and mentally, and the Vikings seem prepared to let him steer the car without rushing him toward a destination. At 37, Smith could rejoin Minnesota right before the season, wait until several weeks have passed to limit the strain on his body, or decide that his playing career has reached its conclusion. But every additional day of uncertainty makes planning for his absence more complicated. Smith cannot be measured only through tackles, sacks, and interceptions. He knows every corner of Brian Flores' defense. He identifies formations, delivers adjustments, conceals coverages, and takes on multiple assignments without broadcasting the plan before the snap. That understanding is earned through actual Sunday pressure, like calluses built over years of hard work, and it cannot be transferred to another safety overnight. If Smith stays away, Josh Metellus looks like the strongest candidate to direct communication and operate in the deep half. Moving Metellus there, however, simply opens another door. Who lines up beside him? Jay Ward and Theo Jackson remain possible answers, and rookie Jacoby Thomas could ultimately determine how the entire safety group is arranged. The Vikings drafted Thomas out of Miami in April because they believe in what he could become. But asking any rookie safety to start immediately in the NFL is a steep climb. Asking him to do it inside Flora's complex attacking system adds another pack of weight to his shoulders. If Thomas demonstrates that he can process the scheme and manage important duties, Minnesota may be more willing to proceed without Smith. If Thomas is not prepared, either Ward or Jackson must make a substantial jump, or the Vikings may need to find someone who is not currently on the roster. Meanwhile, the defense is not the only unit waiting to identify its leader. Former Vikings head coach Brad Childress offered his assessment of Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy, and he looked beyond their arms and athletic ability. Murray possesses both qualities, but Childress said the defining challenge for each quarterback is whether he can remain in the pocket and deliver the football with anticipation. At this level, waiting for a receiver to become obviously open is like arriving at the airport after the plane has left. The throw has to come before the separation appears, with the quarterback trusting that the receiver will reach the intended space. This battle might stretch throughout training camp and perhaps all the way into the preseason. Minnesota could therefore open camp without knowing who will take control of the offense or whether the secondary's most experienced voice will ever report. And as if that were not enough tension, the uncertainty at quarterback has already generated a proposed move that pushes this competition into completely different territory. Here is where the quarterback discussion takes a hard turn because Kyler Murray potentially beating J.J. McCarthy would do more than rearrange two names on a depth chart. Winston Wilcox of Fansided presented a hypothetical deal that would send McCarthy to the Indianapolis Colts, with Minnesota receiving Anthony Richardson Sr. and a 7th-round selection in 2027. Before anybody runs through the wall over this, the label matters. This is not a confirmed negotiation, and no report says the Vikings are actively attempting to move McCarthy. The proposal is based entirely on the possibility of Murray earning the starting position. Even as a theoretical exercise, though, it places a difficult question squarely on Minnesota's desk. Should losing one quarterback competition really shut the door on McCarthy's entire future with the Vikings? His uneven season produced 1,632 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Pro Football Focus gave him a 61.8 overall grade over 310 passing snaps. McCarthy also delivered 19 big-time throws, reminders of the ability that convinced Minnesota to spend a first-round choice on him while registering 15 turnover-worthy plays. That statistical split is a tug-of-war between promise and concern, which is exactly why evaluating him remains difficult. He has shown moments when he looks capable of directing this offense, but he has also made enough costly mistakes that the starting role cannot simply be wrapped up and handed to him. Murray came to Minnesota with something to prove after the Arizona Cardinals moved forward without him, and plenty of observers believe the former #1 overall selection will emerge as the winner. If Murray does take the job, the Vikings must choose between developing McCarthy behind him and considering McCarthy as a possible trade asset. With Indianapolis, McCarthy could begin behind Daniel Jones, who is working to recover the form he showed before tearing his Achilles. Should Jones struggle physically or fail to reach his previous standard, McCarthy might eventually have an opening to compete for the starting position. Richardson would arrive in Minnesota, carrying extraordinary physical tools, but also needing significant development. Within this proposed arrangement, Murray would lead the depth chart. Carson Wentz would hold the second spot, and Richardson could refine his mechanics, decision-making, and overall consistency with Kevin O'Connell. Minnesota is guaranteed to have Murray for only this season, meaning Richardson could, in theory, become part of the future if O'Connell found the correct combination to unlock him. And that is where this trade idea starts wobbling like a table with one short leg. McCarthy is still a former first-round investment who has already demonstrated the ability to create big-time throws in Minnesota's system. Richardson remains an enormous developmental bet who would demand time, patience, and considerable coaching. Adding a 7th-round choice does not come close to balancing that difference in value. Yes, the premise catches your attention because it would relocate two young quarterbacks facing heavy pressure and give each a new setting. But sending McCarthy away because he lost a single training camp competition would be an awfully quick verdict. Minnesota would first need to conclude that there is no viable future between McCarthy and the organization. Nothing currently indicates that the Vikings have made such a determination. Still, if Murray leaves absolutely no doubt and separates himself decisively, do not expect this subject to vanish without another word. Elsewhere, Jalen Nailor no longer has to wonder about his next destination because the former Vikings receiver has already stepped onto the biggest stage of his professional opportunity. While hypothetical deals swirl around McCarthy, Nailor has joined the Las Vegas Raiders after signing a 3-year contract worth $35 million. The agreement includes $18 million guaranteed, a $6 million signing bonus, and an approximate annual average of $11.67 million. That is serious financial faith in a wide receiver who finished 2025 with 29 receptions, 444 yards, and 4 touchdowns. At first glance, those totals may not resemble the resume of a future primary target, but the numbers were produced while Nailor dealt with unstable quarterback play and a narrow lane to touches. In Minnesota, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson stood ahead of him in the line for targets. Las Vegas may remove that traffic jam entirely. Sam Warren of The Athletic expects Nailor to reach career highs, and the circumstances certainly give that prediction room to breathe. After trading leading target Jacoby Myers in November, the Raiders made Nailor their only premium wide receiver addition of the offseason. People can question that approach, but it hands Nailor a role Minnesota could never realistically promise him, a genuine chance to become the featured receiver. Reuniting with Kirk Cousins may also help him hit the ground running. Nailor and Cousins already shared time with the Vikings, giving them familiarity and established chemistry before they take a snap together in Las Vegas. Because the Raiders do not have a clearly established number 1 receiver standing in Nailor's way, there is a reasonable case that he enters the year as their best wideout. If his production takes off, Minnesota will inevitably hear questions about whether it failed to recognize how high his ceiling could rise with more opportunities. At the same time, the Vikings already had Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson commanding the football. Matching the Raiders' contract for someone who would continue serving as a secondary option in Minnesota would have been a tough check to write. The louder alarm for the Vikings may instead be sounding in the defensive backfield. Mo Moton of Bleacher Report proposed that Minnesota send a late-round selection in 2027 to the Kansas City Chiefs in exchange for cornerback Christian Fulton. After Byron Murphy Jr., the Vikings' cornerback depth chart carries plenty of question marks. Isaiah Rodgers surrendered an 88.2 passer rating when targeted last season, and James Pierre has started just 13 games during his career. Fulton played in only 8 games last year, but he allowed an 81.7 passer rating and has accumulated 53 career starts. At 27, Fulton could line up on the boundary whenever Murphy shifts into the slot, or he could serve as season protection if injuries strike. Fulton and Jefferson also share a chapter from their past. Both played at LSU, captured the 2019 National Championship, and then entered the 2020 NFL Draft. Again, this is a suggested trade, not confirmation that Minnesota is pursuing him. The difference between this proposal and the McCarthy concept is that Fulton's projected cost and role fit together without forcing a square peg into a round hole. Nailor is receiving the kind of chance the Vikings probably were not positioned to provide. Fulton, on the other hand, could give Minnesota something its cornerback room does not currently offer in abundance: dependable experience at a position still surrounded by uncertainty. Now training camp is approaching, and the Vikings are carrying a suitcase filled with choices that could redirect the entire season. The backfield is betting on improved health, young development, and a stronger design. Harrison Smith is operating on his own schedule, but losing him would put tremendous weight on a secondary that has not yet found solid ground. J.J. McCarthy sits in the center of a quarterback fight that will continue feeding speculation, even though exchanging him for Anthony Richardson would be a major roll of the dice. Jalen Nailor may be walking toward a breakout opportunity in Las Vegas, and Christian Fulton stands out as a potentially sensible defensive addition. So tell me where you draw the line. Would Minnesota regret trusting this running back group, giving up on McCarthy too quickly, or reaching the season without adding another cornerback? Sound off below. Lock in with us for the next episode. SKOL Vikings, let's go.